I'm Shelby Marshall. I'm Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Fablevision Studios, and I am chairing this afternoon's session. And I'm very, very happy to be here. This is Adaptivity in the Wild, Individualizing Reading Supports in Open Learning Scenarios with Bob Dolan and Kim Ducharme. Bob Dolan is founder and principal of Diverse Learners Consulting and Senior Innovation Scientist at CAST. He applies his expertise in neuroscience, learning science, assessment, instructional design, UX design, and programming to providing diverse learners with flexible and effective learning opportunities, and educators with the resources and supports to facilitate this. For over 20 years, Bob has designed, implemented, and evaluated technology-based learning and assessment solutions with emphases on cognition, accessibility, and usability. He has particular passion on the role of universal design for learning for improving instruction and assessment, as well as adaptive learning solutions that address cognitive and non-cognitive factors. He has served as principal investigator on research projects funded by NIH, NSF, DOE, and private foundations. Bob received a BS in biology from Cornell and a PhD in brain and cognitive science from MIT. Kim Ducharme is the Director of Educational User Experience Design at CAST. She leads her organization's creative processes and collaborates on project strategy, design discovery, and prototyping, and agile design and development of digital learning environments and tools. She designs learning experiences that embrace learner variability and leverage technology to expand learning opportunities for all individuals. I am really thrilled to be part of this. I would have attended anyway, so this is delightful. So off to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great to see you too, Shelby. I think we've run into each other at Fablevision probably.
Yeah, yes, we certainly have.
I am going to present, and then I'm going to share my screen. Sorry, I'm thinking aloud as we go here. Let me, and I'm, Bob, not going to be paying attention to the chat while I'm sharing my screen.
Okay.
And
I'll stop passing you notes under the table then.
so the proverbial, can you see my screen?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. Here we go. So to you, Bob, do you want to have a start?
All right. Okay. Welcome everyone to our presentation for the next hour or 55 minutes entitled Adaptivity in the Wild, Individualized Reading Supports in Open Learning Scenarios. And Kim and I are going to be passing the mic, and we'll be able to make these slides available to you all afterwards. Next slide, please. So we're going to start with some just brief introductions of ourselves and the audience member, singular at this point. We're then going to just talk for a quick overview of adaptive learning. Now, we're part of the ALICE track, but because of a conflict with another conference earlier this week, we weren't presenting during most of the presentations for ALICE, which is focusing on adaptive learning. So we're going to do a little brief intro on adaptive learning and how we're looking at it. And then we're going to talk about, the bulk of our presentation is about our center that we're working on called Sizzle and Inclusive Reader, and we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A. Next slide, please. So actually, we don't need to do much of an introduction. Shelby gave a wonderful introduction, but Kim and I, and add on what you'd like, Kim, I do more of the research focus. Well, we both do a huge research focus. Kim is a leader of our design group and also our design-based research efforts. I do a lot of those as well, and I also do qualitative and quantitative research. So it's a fabulous team that we've got at CAST doing this type of research, and you'll start getting a sense of some of the projects we've been working on as we talk.
Right.
Now I see we're up to 2 audience members, and I'd love to hear from them. Now, since we're a webinar, I don't know that you can speak, but is there some way that the two attendees can just in the chat
Oh, yeah,
indicate?
please, yeah, attendees, feel free to just put comments, questions, or anything you want to say into the chat.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
And
yeah, we have
feel
3 now.
free to, and
sorry.
you can also say to panelists and attendees, if you want to, you don't have to chat only to the panelists, you can change that setting.
Fabulous.
It makes it a little more open conversation.
Yeah, so don't feel put on the spot now, but if at some point you could just quickly indicate who you are, where you're from, what are your interests in adaptive learning and interest in this talk, we'd love to get a better sense of who you are. So thanks for that.
Right.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about adaptive learning. Next slide, please. So again, really briefly, there's a lot of confusion over the term adaptive learning, and it's been getting kind of watered down, unfortunately. But we define it as online instruction or tutoring that modifies content, students' tasks, and or the supports or scaffolds they receive as a function of their individual and ongoing and often real-time learning needs. At the very, very simple end of things, it could be, one could argue whether this is really enough to be adaptive learning, just providing students with customized lesson plans consisting of topics that he or she or they have not yet demonstrated mastery on. It's sort of a low level of adaptivity. Typically, when we talk about adaptivity, we're talking about intelligent tutoring systems that have more sophisticated models of the learning process, rather than just yay or nay kind of a decision. Typically constructivist models of learning. And these can get to be pretty complex problems and often leverage artificial intelligence. This is all distinguished from just allowing students to change things like background color or change other parameters of their environment. These can be important. Even if they seem gratuitous, they're often important, but that's not what we're talking about as adaptive. So again, sometimes the word is used a little bit loosely. Next slide, please. In the classic adaptive learning solution, it's all about creating these models. A very simple example on the left here is where you have a model of the domain. That's the set of knowledge and skills that you want the students to learn. And you have a model of how to get the students there, right? And these can get to be fairly sophisticated models as you move into constructivist approaches. And so it's really modeling the teaching and the learning of the domain. And then finally, you have some model of the student's current knowledge, skills, abilities, learning preferences, learning needs, etc. There may also be additional models like a content model that can also be part of the learning model, but they tend to be pretty sophisticated. And the more sophisticated they are, especially in more challenging domains, the more accurate they can be in delivering content and support are appropriate for the student. So that's the classic adaptive learning model. We're asking a tough question here. We're wondering what could we do in the adaptive learning realm if we don't know the domain model, if we don't know the learning model, and if in fact we have limited information about the student even. And that's what we're calling in the wild. So hold that question, that basic question of, just how adaptive can we be without these key models? Hold that for a while, because we're going to dig in and start talking to you about the center grant called Sizzle. And Kim, is that you or is that me talking about Sizzle?
Right, I can continue. Are you ready?
I am
that
ready.
Was quite the cliffhanger.
Yes.
So what is this project? This is the project we're about to show you, the tool we're about to show you is a product of the Center for Inclusive Software for Learning, or Sizzle. And the tool is the Clusive Reader. And so we have a sort of center website that you can explore at sizzle.cas.org. It is funded by the U.S. Office of Special Education Programs, and we're partnering with SRI and the IDRC at OCAD, and that is a lot of acronyms. So SRI is now Bob, provide decoding of the acronyms.
I'm sorry, the OCAD University.
OCAD University, there
OCAD
in
University,
Toronto.
the development research. I can't remember what IDRC. D is for design. I think R is for research.
That's right, inclusive design research.
Inclusive Design and Research Center. Yeah,
and SRI is our research partner, and it's just a wonderful team, wonderful team. So we have a center where you can learn all about the products, the research behind it and whatnot. You can also go there to register that you'd like to actually work with us on the prototypes, on the betas, etc. Do you want to say a little bit about UDL, Bob, before we go into Clusive?
Yeah, those of you who know CAST, or those of you who know Universal Design for Learning, know that that CAST first developed the Universal Design for Learning framework back starting in the 90s, based upon the principles of universal design that came from Ron Mace in the field of architecture. But rather than looking at accessibility toward just content and just interfaces, Universal Design for Learning is focusing on how to make learning opportunities accessible. And the framework is a way of looking at multiple research validated best practices in education, according to three lenses, which we call the overlying principles. They're based on the concept that you want to provide students with flexibility, because no one size fits all solution works. So it's also predicated on the fact that there's a lot of neurodiversity in how we learn. And if you look at it from the network of three networks that oversee the learning processes, UDL describes that we want to provide students with multiple means of engagement to address differences in their affective networks. We want to provide students with multiple means of representation to address diversity in recognition networks, and finally provide students with multiple means of action and expression to address variations in strategic networks. The goal of UDL is not only to allow students access in the short-term sense to appropriate, challenging content and tasks and learning goals, but also we want UDL focuses on what we really want students to go to in the long run, what we call developing expert learners, students who are purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, and strategic and goal-driven, sort of what we call the bottom line of Universal Design for Learning. And the link at the bottom of the page here shows you the UDL guidelines themselves. And if you're not familiar with UDL, I encourage you to take a look there, and you'll learn a whole lot more about UDL.
Great, thanks, Bob. So we want to show you the Clusive tool, but first, just to give you kind of a 20,000-foot view on the approach. So on the lower left, you see learners. On the upper right, you see accessible content. But how those learners approach and receive and experience that content is that's the secret sauce there. So we have these arrows between the students and the content and the learners. And the idea is that they access content in a flexible, customizable, adaptive way. That's a bit basic idea. There is teacher and parent support, and there's underlying discovery support for their own personal learning preferences, strengths, and needs. So all getting at that expert learner, them learning about themselves as learners and what works best for them in what situation, for what topics, etc. Okay, so Clusive is, as we said, free, adaptive, customizable reading environment. Students can use it as a free reading tool, or they can use it in conjunction with a teacher in the classroom and be assigned readings, etc. They can build their own library. You can upload readings to this. So it's a growing public library. And bottom line is it helps learners build reading skills and self-awareness. So here you can go to this at your leisure. It's a tour, a quick video tour of Clusive, but we thought it would be kind of fun to show it to you live. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out. I'm going to show you Clusive first as a student. So here I am. Let's hope this live demo goes correctly. And what you're seeing is it's still, in development. So some of the features that we'll show you in the slides are actually not yet implemented. But at its most basic level, I have a dashboard. I have some recent reads. I have some thoughts I've contributed, which I'll show you as we get inside. So let's say I go to the library and I decide I want to read something. I'm going to go to, let's go to our child actors exploited in the film industry. I'm right away being asked to provide what I feel I know about these words. Have I heard it before? Do I know it? Do I actually use it? Do I really own it? So I'm going to say, I'm just going to go through these 5-word instance. Never heard it. Interest, yes. I know it, but I don't use it. Unfortunate all the time because I'm a teen. Okay, now here I am in an article. I have many supports. I have preferences. I can set my line height, my font size, etc. My background color theme. I can hide and show features. I can scroll or turn pages. And there are a number of reading tools. So far, what we have is my ability to choose my voice and my reading speed. I'm just going to reset everything. And as you can see, there's a read aloud there. There's the ability to take notes, to look up things, to highlight. And I want to add a note. Here's my note. So I can do all that. I can also, as you remember, I was rating my words some words as I came in. That helped Clusive deliver up the right challenge, what Clusive thought was the just right challenge level for me as a reader. Now, I don't want to spoil, I don't want this to be a spoiler alert, but it is a transparent adaptivity. So I can actually go here and switch my version of the article. So it's saying I am here. Might I want a little more challenge with some words that are a little more advanced for me? Or do I need less challenge level because the topic is hard? Do I want more challenge level because I love science? Whatever. So there's a transparent feature there. And ultimately, it's also going to say, here's how we made this decision. So the other thing I can do once I've finished reading it is I can provide my thoughts. So what, and this came up automatically, or I can deliver it up. So how did this reading make me feel? Of course, I felt happy about it. I'm a little bit annoyed because I'm a teen and I always am annoyed. How much do I feel I learned from this reading? I felt like I learned a lot all about the child actor industry. And now I'm getting the option of saying why. Wow, on the child actor industry. Okay, maybe that's just a note to self. So I just included that. Now I can go back and read something else. I can go on to my dashboard. And now what it's showing me is all of the thoughts I've provided thus far. And if I want to look at what else I rated as happy, I can see that. I can also get a sense of relatedness with other readers that felt that same way about some other articles that might be something I want to read. So that's just a nice little feature there. One other thing as I'm reading, I don't know if you noticed, there were some words that I could look up. And these are also adaptive based on what Clusive thinks I knows and where I need to practice and whatnot. So there's a word that I can look up and I can weigh in on it, or I can add it at that rating will add it to this feature called the word bank. And on this word bank, I can keep track of what I feel like I'm learning. I can move things along if I feel like I know it. Contaminate, I learned that one. Agility, I'm going to just remove that one. These ones I feel like I'm learning. And so that's kind of a really nice way for them to keep track of their vocabulary progress. And we have a bunch more features that are going to land on the dashboard. And then on the teacher side, I won't show you the teacher dashboard yet because we'll talk about looping the teacher in a bit. I think maybe that's enough of a preliminary dashboard tour. Now, Bob, do you want to talk about adaptivity through a UDL lens?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. So you have a basic sense of the Clusive reader and the supports it provides. And that's the foundation on which we've been asking these questions about adaptivity, because we do want to provide additional reading supports for students as a function of what they need. We know that often the students who most need the scaffolds and supports, even the ones that have been demonstrated by research to be effective for them, that they don't often choose them on their own, right?
Sure.
So with that in mind, as I said earlier with UDL, we can have these proximal goals of helping the students in the here and now with their learning goals. But there's a longer range goal as well, to build these expert learners. So adaptive learning has typically been applied in the proximal sense. So you want students to be able to participate in the general curriculum, work alongside their classmates, we also want to help them to develop as expert learners. So adaptive learning, we think of it more of as a scaffold than an ongoing support. We want students to, as expert learners, develop those skills themselves so that they can decide for themselves what are the content modifications and supports that they would need. We want, in essence, the not to be so much dependent upon adaptive learning, but to develop the metacognitive and self-regulated learning skills themselves. So how do we do this? So there's two main ways that we do this. We allow transparency in any adaptive decisions or recommendations so that we can model for students why these choices and recommendations are made. so that they can get a better sense themselves. We also allow them to override any system decisions to promote their own self-agency. So we might say, we think that based upon your vocabulary knowledge, based on other probes, based on what we know about your immediate learning goals, that these types of supports would be important for you. The student might say, no, actually, I want something more challenging in this instance. Or they might say, I want something less challenging in this instance, right? So that we believe that the agency is really, really important. And that agency can't really be taken by the student unless there is that transparency about why these things were chosen or recommended for them in the first place. All right, so that's the kind of the UDL approach. What Kim's going to describe now is a number of adaptive features that we currently have in Clusive. We're going to go through those, demonstrate those, even discuss those, and then we're going to talk about adaptive features that are coming down the pike.
Great. So, and some of these I modeled, so they will sound familiar. So one of the first ones is the text leveling and adaptivity, complexity leveling based on vocabulary knowledge. So that Clusive keeps track of what you've rated for words. It also looks at what you've looked up for words and how you've managed your word bank. Adaptive onboarding, there are a couple of ways you may have noticed little tooltips coming up as I was touring. If I'm a guest or a new user and I haven't tried out a feature like the settings, for example, then Clusive will nudge me to try that out. If I've already tried it out, it won't. So in that way, it's adaptive. It will also provide learning tooltips. So encouraging me to switch the challenge level or pushing me to challenge myself. So that's an example of it's not simply how does the tool work, but sort of the underlying how you might apply it for your learning. Affect-based adaptivity, I think we'll talk about that when we talk about next steps, right? I think we've got that one in the next slide, right?
Yeah.
So what we want to do is press pause and have everyone try out Clusive for yourself. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, and I'm going to ask you to go to Clusive.
I just pasted the URL into the chat.
So you're going to see the login screen and simply click on try Clusive as a guest. And then before you do that, let me say that here's what we'd like you to do. We'd like you to find the article, Are After School Jobs Helpful or Harmful? So you can just do a search for after school jobs or just scroll down to find it. And what we want you to try out is the word rating on the way in that you saw me do. Check out the word bank, try switching your challenge level and adding your thoughts, which are in the lower left part of the screen once you're on a reading. And as you go, just think about what's wowing you, what are you wondering, what are you confused by? So maybe we'll just give 5 minutes to that, Bob.
Yeah, and feel free if you have any questions or challenges, use the chat.
Absolutely.
And no question too big or small.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, we'd all be in the same place here, right? Discussing this.
So raise your hand if you aren't able to get in as well.
I don't know if we can see raised hands, but
you're right.
But
just
yeah,
maybe in the chat. So
just use the chat.
Clusive up. So you might need the full URL.
Okay, we will be able to see raised hands. Great.
Here's the full URL with http:// just in case that helps.
Thanks, Kim.
I know that Chrome was better at that than some of the other browsers at first, not including that. But so we have a Jeopardy music time clock.
Right.
4:05 will reconvene. So Bob and I just had a behind the scenes chat, and we're thinking, because it's such a nice small group, that we'd like to share the QA site with you, which is basically our development site. And there you'll be able to see more of the features that are in development. So I was actually sharing with you my QA site. So let's give it to them now. Yes.
Great.
And here it is. It's simply adding a QA between Clusive and CAS. You're getting a sneak preview. Okay. I think that's pretty good. Shall we continue?
Yeah.
That? Okay, let me figure out how to get back my screen sharing. So was anyone able to find the article? The after school jobs article? It actually is not totally critical that that's the one you chose. It's just some have text leveling, like different levels of text, and others do not. And that's just going to be the reality in the wild. People will upload texts that may or may not have been given that treatment.
Yeah. Did anyone have any trouble navigating through the library? We've designed Inclusive Reader to support many different learning scenarios, ranging from teachers assigning specific content to students just browsing freely on their own.
I see Rowan enjoyed the many options, ability to customize the levels, and seems like it was pretty user friendly. That's music to our ears. But let's take it further, right, Bob?
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyone have any feedback? Oh, yeah, I'm just wondering if anyone has feedback on, again, we talk about agency. So when you're going into the article, we do have these little probes looking at some of the more challenging vocabulary terms in the articles and asking students about their familiarity, but they have the option to skip that. And I'm wondering if there's any feedback on what was that like?
Were you tempted to skip?
Yeah.
Right. There's a question about how did we choose the articles, the words in the React video.
Yeah.
So do y'all know about the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence? They have a wonderful, what's their tool called?
I'm drawing a blank on it too.
Quadrants. Yeah, I'm going to share just because. Yeah. So what is the name of their, darn it, if, so anyway, our words, what is it called, Bob?
I'm drawing a blank on it too.
Anyway, they have a tool that allows you to, weigh in on your feelings, and it's got 4 quadrants and a ton of words. And basically, we narrowed down from that ton, and we have our wonderful, brilliantly smart content expert who kind of made the decisions on which words to narrow down to. So yeah, in a nutshell, that was how we landed on those words.
Yeah. And Shelby, I see you have a question about the words chosen for the word rating. This is all done algorithmically. Over time, as we get more and more data from students, we'll be able to examine the validity of having some words versus others. So it might turn out that certain choices of words don't give us a whole lot of information about the student. So we'll use those less and less, and then we'll find other words that are giving us more information.
Right.
So that's just going to get refined over time.
And in a perfect world, Shelby, we would have something like this. Like here's a word rating panel, right? Where each word in a row is related to each other, right? Get better, improve, ameliorate, join, participate, partake, right? That's perfect world. It's hard to do without a lot of content editors behind the screen.
Yeah.
But this is what we're shooting for. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Shall we? Next steps.
Yeah.
So what's next, Bob?
So what we want to do is, so we're collecting students' feedback on how the articles made them feel. We want to be able to start making recommendations on that. In general, and this covers a lot of these next steps, is we wanted to start getting a better clue from the reader what their intention is. What is their learning goal? What is the context in which they're learning? So for example, if a student is picking some content because they want to learn more, it looks interesting, they want to perhaps be engaged by the topic, as opposed to picking an article because they think it'll help them improve their reading skills, as opposed to cramming for a test. It's an article they've read before, but they want to just quickly review it now. And these aren't even exclusive categories, but information about that in advance can help us with the recommendations of actual content and the supports the students might need. So similarly, affect, if we start having a sense on the genre and on the difficulty and how that impacts students' affect, we can start making recommendations that go beyond the more typical reading supports, where we're only looking at decoding skill, vocabulary skills, basic reading comprehension skills, and are starting to get into some more of those affective components, which are a key component of universal design for learning, as you saw, and also a key component to learning. We also want to get more specific about students' reading skills, and through a discovery process that includes students' self-reports about their reading skills and/or actually structured probes that will evaluate, again, their decoding skills, their vocabulary skills, and their reading comprehension skills. And then again, by having our content all tagged, we can make recommendations for students. I will mention that, Kim, as you mentioned earlier, that we have some content that is written at different levels of text complexity. That's all being done by hand. If we have time and there's interest, we could talk about the process of whether that can be done in an automated or semi-automated fashion. Right now, we're doing that by hand. So again, if we have more information about the student and their reading skills, their context for reading, their learning goals, we can make more accurate recommendations when we have multiple levels of text complexity available for content.
Can I jump in and just mention one other aspect of that? So we're talking about different kinds of, not leveling, but sort of ways to digest a reading. And another adaptivity feature that we hope to implement is around, is going to use crowdsourcing. So can we deliver to the student the key ideas in an article based on what everyone's highlighted, for example. And then based on their goal, if they're just getting ready for a discussion in class, maybe that's what they need, is the key ideas, for example.
Great. And then finally, we want to look at supports for students with varying executive function challenges and providing supports there, especially when we have a little bit more of a model of students' learning goals. Again, instead of these being isolated chunks of content, if we know they're chapters in a book and a student might have a goal to finish the book at a certain amount of time, how can we help them with pacing? And again, in a transparent way, so that they're not so much dependent upon being told, okay, you need to read 2 chapters a day for the next 5 days, but rather have them explicitly set the goals and monitor their goals, but through an adaptive process that models that for them, so they can take on that responsibility themselves over time.
Right.
So these are next steps.
Do we, before we jump into the dashboard, do we want to pause? Are there any reflections on this aspirations for adaptivity? Any comments?
Yeah.
Just want to not completely talk at you.
Right. Yeah,
Nor put you
please.
on the spot. Okay. Okay, good. Let's show you the dashboard.
Yeah, let me just give a preamble on this
yes,
one.
please do.
I am having worked in adaptive learning now for a long time, I am a huge advocate of explicitly looping in the teacher. There's some instances where the learning scenario is a one-on-one relationship between the technology and the student.
Yeah.
But we don't want to, that's not what we've designed for here. We support that model, but we really want to support the model of learning as a social engagement. And to the extent that adaptivity is applied to the student, how can we make that transparent to the teacher as well?
Mm-hmm.
What is being offered to the students? What's the students' progress? What are the students' use of these supports? And for that reason, we have the teacher dashboard. Take it away, Kim.
So if you remember on the student side, when my reactions showed as a cumulative, in a cumulative view, and I could click on surprised and see all the readings I rated that way, as well as what other inclusive readers felt about that for the teacher. What they see is which students felt that way. And so you see lists of students here. And if you recall the reading, the knowledge check that came after that, so I could weigh in on whether I felt I learned a lot, a little, or nothing. So that data is going to appear in each of these panels at the bottom as a little graph that says, gives the teacher at a glance a sense for what their students feel they're learning about this one, that one, or the other one, as well as on articles that they've assigned. So you'll have a toggle between those two, and then you'll be able to see right away which students felt what. So a single article on the right here will bring up, if you click on that little graph, it'll bring up this intel around which students felt what way and what their details on that were. And then we're also thinking about ways to make that transparent back to the student. They can always see it in their reading panel, but we're also thinking about word clouds and, topic word clouds and whatnot. So we're thinking a lot about what is going to make this a richer experience. Let me show you the live dashboard so you can see what else is going on here. So I'm logged in on one browser as a student and one browser as a teacher. Continue. Okay. Okay. So here I am. I am the teacher and I have several classes. Right now you're seeing this test class, if you will. And what you're seeing is the cumulative reactions my students are feeling. You're not yet seeing the knowledge checks, but I can also see student by student what they're all reading and for how long. Overall, by month or past week, I can see which are articles that they've shared. I've actually shared all of these. If you see in my student view, I'm on the test teacher class, and these are all articles the teacher has shared or assigned versus all content, which is a lot, and there's filters and whatnot to sift through all of that. I'm going to go back to my class, and so the teacher can also see if any of these readings are readings shared that other students have read. You can see that relationship. And eventually what we're working on next is this student's name would be a link to a student detailed view on the teacher's side. That in a nutshell is are most of the features that we've got so far for the dashboard.
All right. Rowan, I really appreciate your comment here. That is usually the toughest aspect on adaptive learning platforms, in my opinion, yielding stress-free supportive feedback from students. And I want you to say more about that, if you can.
Stress-free supportive feedback from teachers, from students.
What came to mind, I'm just filling in time here while hopefully you're typing, Rowan.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like one of the big questions is, the burden of having to do these vocabulary checks and giving your reaction afterwards, and even putting in especially free text afterwards. That can be stressful. So I'm wondering if that's what you're referring to there in terms of stress-free feedback from students.
Or did you mean for students?
Yeah.
I'm wondering as well, because when we were doing our reading environment called UDO, which Shelby may remember that, we worked with you all on that. We had ways, especially on the dashboard, to celebrate every positive, because they were all, it was geared towards struggling readers. So just celebrating all the little progress steps on the way was really an important thing to do. We're thinking of working a confetti cannon into the dashboard for inclusive.
Why not?
Well, I'm going to jump in now for a sec. We're getting fairly close to the end anyway, but I want.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm. You're mentioning certainly reminds me. It's relevant to a question I have, which is how in the testing you've done so far, do students participate in all of these different ways in which they're being basically solicited to provide feedback and give information about themselves and their thoughts and their reactions and their interests and whatnot. Is it burdensome? Is it something that they're willing to go along with?
Yeah, and of course it varies so much as a function of the individual student and the context for their reading. There might be initially some novelty effects where they're willing to do it, and then over time it becomes real old. So, we're planning for this to be, when I first showed that model of how adaptive learning is typically done, I didn't put an X through the student model, but I did indicate that sometimes we're going to have some pretty sparse information in there. And that's one of the reasons why we will. Also, depending on how you ask students to self-report, the data may not be very good, even if they do it. So you got to be really careful there. But I'll say that we didn't talk about this. We're also collecting a lot of automated information from the students. So we're looking at their clickstream. We're gathering all their clickstream data. So we will start having more information coming in for free from the students. What support do they use? How long do they spend reading? Patterns of usage that will provide additional information that we can start mining to start building that student model. So it is a combination of that sometimes bothersome, sometimes fickle data that we're going to get from self-reports with this behind the scene data.
But Shelby, that is golden. That is the question of the hour. How much is too much? What are they going to be willing, right, to self-report? And I'm always, chiming that that mantra of we've got to find the right balance, and we've got to give them a reason to want to. And this little React wheel, it's beautiful, right? So that's kind of one little kind of engagement factor, if you will. But also, if you notice going into an article, if you're willing to rate an article, you're going to get a better experience. So we're actually working on making that experience more fun, more game-like, sort of like Fruit Ninja. I don't know if you have ever played that, but yes, how much self-reporting can we get from the students is to be determined.
Yeah,
it's a huge goal, a huge question I have.
And it's going to be an interesting process, because I think, first of all, I have to say, this is amazing.
Thank you.
This is just absolutely mind-blowingly amazing.
Great.
Thank you.
And it's going to be even more amazing, I can tell. And one of the things that is both wonderful about it and also I think challenging about it is that you're trying to get students to not only learn how to read better, but to learn how to become better self-directed, self-aware learners.
Exactly.
And that's it's kind of sneaky, because
Yes, it is.
you're not really telling them that.
Exactly.
So, but it works better. That will happen more if they participate more.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if it feels valuable to them as well. I mean, that's the hard job that we have to do. We have to be offering recommendations and supports that work for them, and that they eventually go like, whoa, okay, I see what, okay, yeah. But it's kind of like, I don't know, I'm thinking of it kind of this planned obsolescence, that if we do our job well for a given student wouldn't need us anymore.
Yeah.
And in the truest sense of a scaffold.
Wow.
Yes.
How long have you guys been working on this thing?
So we're
This is
in
the end of year 3, beginning of year 4.
or something like that.
Well,
Yeah.
I'd say 2 years though, because the first year doesn't count, right?
Yeah, we don't count the first year.
It's amazing.
Yeah, but it's a 5-year project, and we're past the halfway point here. Yeah.
Well,
And so I will say that we are, looking for teachers to help work with us in the fall and really give it for a true test drive. So anyone interested in helping out or just being beta testers or interested in focus group or know folks who might be, please join us. It'd be wonderful.
Yes.
Wow. Well, this is just remarkable, and we could spend a lot more time messing around with it, but yeah, we can certainly plug that the desire for teachers to participate.
Fantastic.
And I I mean, I would imagine that any presentation you make anywhere in the reading, the reading world, teachers will just jump on this.
Right, absolutely. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, our time is up. I'm sorry to say, because we just spent time with you all afternoon. But yeah, folks, definitely, I'm sure that Bob and Kim would love to continue the conversation with anybody who's interested.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for this opportunity.